Good. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad you're here, and hopefully this will be interesting to you. It's a pretty esoteric. It's not quite as esoteric as Michael's Papel Salado, but it's right up there. And I'm glad to see Susan Frost with us here today because she probably knows more about Guatemala postcards than most people, and that might include Bill Cornwell. So welcome, Susan. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
So we start off today and we talk about Guatemala postal stationery and postal cards. There was one just issued last year. In fact, there were several. So they continue to issue these on some basis. The first 25 years of postal stationery was intensely studied. So there's a lot of information available about those, the different types of the first postal cards, the postal envelopes, those types of things. But for some reason that sort of died out. And one reason is it isn't popular with stamp collectors because of the notion that these aren't stamps. And that may explain it. But what we're going to talk about today, there's more reasons, and that is it's difficult to find this. James Andrews was a student of postal stationery and wrote the last significant article about these, which appeared in the Stamp Collector, and sort of summarized his studies that he had been involved with. One reason for the problem with these and learning about them and collecting them is how scarce they are. I've been collecting these for 25 years, and I have quite a few, but the problem is I only have some fraction of the ones that exist. So studying them is difficult. And then there's a lack of information. So for example, the handbook, Guatemala 2, doesn't even list the 1904 exhibition cards, and so people aren't aware of them. There are catalog numbers for these that Jim Andrews assigned to them, and we'll see those in a minute. So that does exist. David Jickling put these in his book of the catalog of the Guatemala Philately 1971 to 95 or whatever it was. So there is some listing there. So we talked first of all about classification of these. In the upper left, you'll see a souvenir card, which Andrews assigned an SA catalog number 2, the S standing for souvenir, A signifying the first one. These are referred to as Kunzli cards because of who printed them. The second one in the middle is called a souvenir letter card, cataloged SB. Souvenir B was issued for the 1905 National Exhibition. The third one is in the lower left, and it is a series of cards that were released as part of the celebration of the opening of the trans-country railroad from Puerto Barrios to Puerto San Jose. The fourth, the 1913 provisional postal card, which was an overprint on the 1890 postal card. The next one is the 50 centavo postal card, which was released in 1923. And these are the ones we're going to be talking about today. So we'll end up with these types. In the upper left is a postal stationery envelope, which was released sometime in 1923. The center letter sheet was also released in 1923 and is a difficult item to find. On the right is an overprinted letter sheet used by the post office as a notification means, and in the lower left is the 50 centavos postal card overprinted for use as advice of receipt. I don't know. I would like to invite you to ask questions. I don't know how much time we have. Should we do that at the end?
I'm okay if we ask questions along the way. My remarks have been extended, so take your time.
Okay, so we'll start with 1904 exposition cards. And Guatemala liked expositions. They started, you remember, in 1897 with the exposition they had then. They tried to make it an international one. As part of the 1904 exposition, they issued these cards. And we refer to those as Kunstli cards because they were printed in Paris by a firm named Kunstli Freres. 20,000 of each of the 11 different designs were printed by that firm. And so these were available, the overprinted ones were available at the exposition itself. So here's I guess you would say the reverse of the card. And there's two different types of this blue overprint. It says UPU. So we'll look at this just for a minute. In the upper right corner, it says free of franking for use within the country. So these were permitted to be used and mailed from the exposition to an address within Guatemala. You'll see the exposition cancel, the purple circle with the duplex, small gear outlined little cancel that says exposition. And in the lower left is a blue printing that states the mail in the exposition and the date when it opened. So there's two different types of these, curiously. One that has, and I tried to highlight those with the red arrows, which says tiplet, and then on the right side, central. So presumably it means something like typografia, lithografio, or whatever, central. So these exist with and without that small printing on it. So you can get 11 cards with the blue overprint and 11 without it. They seem to be equal in number, and all of them are relatively difficult to find. I don't know, just to give you an idea, what these cost. Typically, I've paid somewhere, I think, between maybe $25 and $95. That may give you an idea. It's sort of, I suppose you could say, depends on your luck and the seller and how much interest there is in that particular time period.
Seems a little low for now, Dave. I've paid more.
Yeah, you can easily pay more. So the harder part, so more difficult than finding the cards themselves, is to find ones that are used appropriately. So here's one that's addressed to an address within Guatemala City, dated on September 16, so a day or so after the start of the exhibit. So the question becomes, anyone could have done this and put this address on there and not mailed it. And quite often, particularly with foreign addresses, we'll see this. They have an address, but it was never mailed. There's a lot of them that have stamps on them that were mailed to foreign destinations. So how do we know that it was used within the country? And the answer is if you look at the bottom of the image on the right, you'll see a cartero marking. By this time in Guatemala, carteros had moved from being mailmen in the post office to more of a specialized kind of agent, and they handled oddball things like this, which of course doesn't have a stamp. So they would mark it with a cartero marking. You'll see that, for example, with airmail covers or special delivery covers in the early 1930s. They often have cartero markings. The experimental flights in the late 20s have those cartero markings. So that's an indication that this actually was used as intended. As with all things Guatemalan, there's also this type of thing that comes up, which is if you see in the lower left, the printing there is not in blue, it's in gold. And these were special cards that were printed for presentation to the government officials, including the president, at the exposition. And I don't have any idea how where to find these. I can say that if you said to me, I want you to either find a cover with one of the first stamp issues on it, or this particular card, it would be infinitely easier to find a first issue cover than this. That's an idea anyway of how difficult these are. So we go from there to the 1905 souvenir letter sheets. Michael, I know you like these. And they get real pricey. I mean, the Kunzlis are expensive, but these things are mind-bogglingly expensive. They were also, if you see in the center of this image, intended to be used free of franking within the country. These were pretty cool things. You'll see the perforations going around the edges, and the outside edge of this letter sheet was gummed on the inside so that people could write a message on it and then fold it in half, lick the gum, which would seal it, and send it. Now, the problem with this is there's 10 different views. This one, unfortunately, is upside down, but I wanted you to see the free frank image on it. So there's 10 different ones of these as far as I know. But what complicates this is there's 15 different colors of ink on 3 colors of paper. And actually, there's one of these which has sort of a rainbow colored printing for the actual image itself. So to begin trying to assemble any kind of, you might say, complete collection of these poses significant logistical and financial difficulties. When these were originally studied, they would do a survey of all the ISGC members and ask them to either send those to Jim Andrews or send a description. And another problem with these that existed was that they were not necessarily thought to be a official postal stationery item because there was no decree found authorizing them for that use, which, thanks be to Gabriel Ramirez about 5 years ago, we now know that there was an official documentation authorizing the issuance and use of these at the exposition. So that was a big, big step forward for recognizing these as official postal stationery. Now, so again, like the Kunzli cards, these things are very difficult to find internally used as they were permitted to be used. So this one actually was used internally. You'll see it's addressed to Frederico something. And the message inside was sent by the nephew of Frederico to his uncle in where was it? Buena Vista, saying, "Hey, I'm at the exposition and I don't see your exhibit. Why don't you have an exhibit this year?" Just to give you an idea of how hard it is to find these, Jim Andrews stated that, quote, "To date, no sheets have been reported that were used during the exposition." And that's been my experience. This is the only one I've ever seen. So that'll give you an idea of that'll give you something to look for. So, and I wanted to put this in here for a couple of reasons. One is the letter sheets were designed by Prudencio Davia, and you'll see his image on this postcard with his signature. His signature appears on the lower right of most of those letter sheets. So now we come to the 1908 Railroad souvenir. Does anyone have any questions right now while you're thinking about it?
I just want to say I'd like to receive a copy of the decree. I think it belongs in the handbook because it resolves the issue.
Well,
Yeah, I would. You can find Gabriel's article on this. It was, I want to say 5 years ago. It's like that in El Quetzal.
it's not really a decree. It's not really a decree. I have to say that it's not really a decree. We can talk about it. It's not really a decree.
That's right. I don't think you'll see it. It was in a newspaper, wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't. When I was living in Connecticut, I talked to a guy selling old books, and he's a dealer in the Catskill Mountains or something like that. I don't even know how to say it in English. And the guy was selling a complete set of some kind of newspaper, official by the government.
That's right.
Devoted completely and exclusively to the 1905 exposition. Well, I thought maybe this is interesting. I called the guy. He sent it to me free of charge. Of course, I put my credit card in advance. I read it, and I found a lot of information in it, including information about these letter sheets, stating that there were 5,000 of each design printed here and there. And I was so excited that I wrote a couple of articles some years ago. So in some way, it's the closest to official information that you're gonna find, in my opinion. And it's very interesting. I can go into some details some other time. And going back to your comments about Prudencio Davila on each letter sheet, I think, remember that the pictures were taken by Valdeavellano the year before, during 1904, because each letter sheet also, I don't remember if they are signed by Valdeavellano, but I can recognize the pictures as Valdeavellano, which is just some comment about it. But I will be happy to let you know, give you pictures and more information about this newspaper that I was lucky to buy from this book dealer in upstate New York by mail, basically. Very interesting.
Yeah, thank you, Gabriel. You are the man, because you notice I quoted you. And so, Michael, you can communicate with Gabriel about that. So that brings us to the 1908 Railroad Souvenir Postal Cards, which are designated SC Souvenir 3rd Series. This was a big deal in Guatemala because they had completed the transcontinental or trans-country railroad from one ocean to the other. And they held this celebration to mark that event. It was attended by all kinds of people, the president, all kinds of dignitaries, railroad people. And this cancel is a little different. You'll see the gearing going kind of shape around the outside edge with a little train engine inside, which is pretty cool. And then this particular second cancel, which was part of the duplex hand stamp, also geared, but this time it has the name of the city. And most of them have Guatemala. You'll see one that has Puerto Barrios there. And then they also reportedly exist from Zacapa. The suggestion was made in G2 that some collectors thought this perhaps served as a ambulante cancel and was used on trains. I don't think there's any evidence of that, but it was at least some sort of inference from these three different cities listed on the duplex. These were issued in 7 different designs, which you can see on the left-hand card. These vary in different ways. But I put this picture on here partly because you'll see in the lower right side at the top of it, the language free from the requirement to use postage stamps. And again, within the country. And so this has 7 different designs with 14 different ink and cardstock combinations. That's not entirely correct. There are more combinations. However, you can see the problem here. The whatever you call, I guess you'd call it the back, the bright pink, doesn't look bright at all on the other side because it had a blue wash as part of the printing process. And so there's a lot of different varieties of this, which we're going to see a few of right now. This is a card, the type number 1, that was used internally without additional postage. You'll see it's addressed to in-city. And again, there's at the lower center of that card, you'll see the Cartero marking showing that it went through the postal system. So these cards are characterized by different types based on, first of all, at least I look first of all, on the lower right, you'll see a list of 9 cities. Those cities, if you could see it, are marked on that card, and were 9 major railroad depots, if you will, terminals on the railroad as it went across the country. Secondly, they differ by the size of the emblem on the reverse. You'll see the Quetzal, and that comes in different sizes. They're also characterized by different sized fonts, particularly on the Ferrocarril Interoceanico. And so for who knows what reason, probably no reason, there were all these different types of cards printed for this. Here's one, the types 6 and 7, you'll see have 5 railroad terminals listed on it rather than the 7.
The other 2.
So I have been collecting these for a while, and I have several types that were not described by Andrews, this being one of them. And I don't know, most of you don't really care about all this little type differentials and stuff, but you'll see here that the emblem with the Quetzal on it is different. You don't remember the last image I showed you, but it had the tail feather sticking down below the bottom of that ribbon. This one does not. And
Oh,
well,
yeah.
this one is curious because it has the printing with the Quetzal on it, identical, wrong, well, types 6 and 7, with the font on it of type 4. So now it's even more complicated because we have known types, but they appear on the same card. So moving on, 1913, the government issued this provisional postal card. They overprinted in 1890 postal card and made it provided for its use in country. Most of the ones that you'll see, because they're difficult to find anyway, were used externally, like this one. And you'll notice that it has a perfined official on it. Sadly, the other perfined official has been removed or fell off or something. One reason it was not used internally was because postal card rate was different than 3 cents. So now we're going to move to what I've called the 1921 issues, if you will. They were authorized in 1921. They weren't released until 1923, which is the earliest known use. The 50-cent postal card didn't correspond to any current postal card rate. The 2.5 peso envelope didn't respond to a regular rate, and as a result, these were barely utilized by the postal patrons. This is also a part of that issue that was released in 1923, perhaps sometime at that time. A 25 centavo letter sheet called a postal memorandum, again, paid no known postal rate at the time. And so they were barely used when they were released and were mostly used later on in the 20s when they were overprinted by the postal department. Here are those 3 postal memorandums. At the top right is the one as originally issued, and then that was overprinted, and at least the authorization to overprint and surcharge them was in 1924, 50 centavos and a 1 peso denomination. Here's one of those, which was used, I want to say, postally and commercially used, and I believe that it was. This is one of the surcharged 25 centavo letter sheets, and it was sent by a farmer in Alta Verapaz up to a customer or merchant in La Tinta, advising him that he had corn to sell and he would be glad to sell it to the guy in La Tinta if the guy in La Tinta would send him 50 burlap bags. So I am going to say I assume that it was commercially used, which is a very rare usage of this surcharge value. The problem with saying that is that 1 peso was a small fraction of the new Quetzal, so it underpaid the postage, and furthermore doesn't have a 1 cent postal tax stamp. So that's the fun you can have with this. Let's see. Most of the surcharged postal memorandum were used by the post office either to notify postal, like postmasters, or sometimes were sent to fincas, like this one, La Perla, advising them of an invoice or sending stamps. But this was used, and you'll see the red overprint at the top that says they overprinted the memorandum postal with Servicio de Fardos Postales. And so this was used to notify postal patron of the arrival of typically a package. It could also be used, I suppose, for use with certified mail items. This was printed on the inside and basically advised them of the arrival of a package. Fardos were foreign packages. Encomiendas were internal use packages. You can see down at the bottom that advises them of the place of origin and some sort of identification for them to give to the postal clerk.
I have never seen one of these.
Well, that's how difficult they are. You can see it again. So you have an idea. So more commonly, what we see are these, which were, again, the 2.5 peso envelope, including the over surcharged envelope. So there's 9 types of these and at least 25 subtypes. So these are identified, the types by, for example, the fonts, Correos Nacional, the bars on each side of Servicio Interior, sometimes the dark bars on top. This one on the long bars has breaks in it. You can see the break on at least the top one. But these were used to send for official purposes. And if you look at the upper right one, you can see next to Servicio Interior, it says Vario for various, advising them that there's various items at the post office to be picked up. And in the lower left, you can see the 2245, which no doubt corresponds to some type of certified mail designation. This is the 50 centavo postal card, which, again, you recall, was not utilized by patrons, so there was a large amount of these remaining on hand, and they were overprinted advice of receipt. You can see the front and back of this one. There's 2 types. One has the advice of receipt printed on the front, the other does not, but the backs are identical. These also, I didn't put these in because I don't want to get into the 1935 President Barrios celebration, which President Carrera used for his own self-promotion, but they did use these for the fair and for that celebration at that time. Now, I'm just about done here, which means I'm about able to complete this within my time allotment. Here's some even more esoteric cards. This was, as you know, Guatemalans like to send New Year's greeting cards like people in other countries send Christmas greeting in the holidays. So these were the Kunzli cards, if you recall, from 1904 that were overprinted with Feliz Año Nuevo 1908. The original Kunzli printing was 220,000, which was 20,000 for each 11 cards. That left after the exposition, presumably 165,000. So if the post office had them on hand, this was one way of using them. I suppose they could have been printed by some commercial outfit in in Guatemala City as well. But this was used used internationally. Well, that was 1908. Here's one from 1909. I'm going to assume, since I have quite a few of these, that they exist on all 11 different Kunstli cards. And then,
David, who
yes.
overprinted these? Was it a government overprint or private?
There's no documentation, so no one knows. To say that it was done by the government would be, I suppose, a reasonable assertion, but you could not prove it. But there's enough of these existing that at least they were, somewhat accepted by customers and used for that purpose. But Michael, I know of no authorization. Now we come to notification cards that were used by the railroad and by the shipping agency in Port of San Jose to notify merchants of the arrival of cargo. So they're quite similar. And you'll see in this particular variety, there's quite a few different types in the early decade of the 20th century. But they have different form numbers. If you look at the lower right one, you'll see 1M indicating that 1,000 were printed, and it has the date. So these dates, I'm not sure, but I think they run from like 1907 to 1911. And Gabriel, who's with us today, is the expert on these. And he could probably tell you a lot more, but he has argued in El Quetzal, and there's been other authors that have as well, saying that these should have some form of ISGC catalog recognition, even though they were fairly limited in distribution, and certainly normal postal customers had no ability to use them, but nonetheless, all the different, there's many types, and Gabriel's described these in El Quetzal. So, Gabriel, you want to say anything? Gabriel, you want to say anything?
Sure. I want to say a lot of things, but there's not much time to do it. They're very interesting. The printings are private, no question about that. I mean, the government didn't authorize these printings on the back of the postal cards. I would like them to be recognized. They have a lot of varieties. You can check my last article that I think I wrote. I don't remember, 2, 3, 4 years ago, maybe. I don't remember. And I'm inclined to put them in a future handbook. But at the same time, I recognize that there is no official documentation about them. I'm referring especially to the printings on the back, because they are called PC5s and PC6, and in some cases PC8s, according to the International Society nomenclature. They're very interesting. They're not official. And any company could do it.
Yes.
But they are interesting.
They are. They were extensively used.
I just wanted to add to that a little bit. For example, I collect Latvia, and in the German catalogs from Latvia, they have a whole volume that really amounts to postal forms. And it's this type of material that's in that catalog. So we could probably extend the handbook at some point. I think this would not be a high priority, but we could certainly have this memorialized. Over.
Yeah, fun. So I think I'm close to done. This was another card, the 1921 Independence postcard. It was issued as part of the celebration of Guatemala's centennial of independence. And they were in some ways quasi-official because they were placed on sale at each department's main post office. And so they have some official character, if you will. I think Gabriel has told me that these were in various released and reprinted in various manifestations for the next 40 years. Is that right, Gabriel? Up into the 60s, weren't they put in schools and stuff? And
Well, yeah, I believe so. Not this design specifically, but the other design that I show it in my article that was written, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. I don't really remember.
yeah.
Yes, they were printed through the decades. I will say until the 1950s probably, and different designs. I don't know how many. At least I saw on eBay 3 or 4 different designs over the years, and that's how much I know about them. They are scarce. They're not common. They're very scarce. They appear on the market very rarely, and you can pay any kind of money to get them.
Yeah, there was some card a month ago that went for 207. Was it 175 or 200? I think $275. Those kinds of things are hard to believe. Anyway, that's the end of my presentation.
That was one quick question I wanted to pick up on, David, was just the overall popularity of these cards. I mean, just in general, if you're looking on eBay and you see something you like, are you the only bidder, or are you having to fend off another 20 people trying to grab the same thing?
Well, that's a good question. There was one that ended on eBay last night that had over 25 bids. I think there was only 6 or 7 bidders, but that's a lot of interest for an eBay lot. There's unfortunately for me, growing interest in these, so that the prices keep going up. You heard Michael and me discussing what these Kunzli cards are going for now. And I know on Del Camp right now, there's a 1905 letter sheet that's listed for $450, something like that. Sometimes you'll see them for $250. So that give you some idea. There's a lot of interest, and it seems to be growing.
What do you think's driving the interest?
That's a good question. For one thing, people like, the thrill of the hunt. We all like that, right? We're collectors. It's a sort of an unknown area that's new and different. If you're like me, I've had every Guatemala stamp, every error. At that point, you lose interest in the stamps. I mean, there's not much more you can. David Linwall and I like perforation varieties, but I mean, you can only do those for so long. So I think, this is a new area for a lot of people, and it's fun.